Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you watch this video. Today is October 30th, and it's good to have you with us as we read through the next chapter in the book of John. Today it'll be chapter 11 of the Gospel of John. And there's a couple things that I want to bring to the surface first. Some things that we see in the chapter. As we go into chapter 11, the death of Lazarus, Jesus' friend, we see Jesus immediately coming off of dealing with religious leaders, not accepting him for who he is. They rejected him even after he confronted them with not only the truth, but also, in Jesus' words, many good works. And so he's coming off of that. He kind of got away a little bit, and then he received word that his friend Lazarus was sick. And that's a key point in the passage, is the message delivered to Jesus said that Lazarus was sick. It seems as though, and as we're going through this book, it just seems like Jesus has got one trial, one struggle after the other. It's just like it's just continuous. Something keeps popping up, something keeps happening, and every time he turns, there's something else. And now it's Lazarus. But what we'll see in that is not necessarily a tragedy or a struggle or something that seems to maybe trip Jesus up as he's traveling around. No, instead, we see God's work being done. And that's another important key in this passage. But what we will see as we see God's work unfold, we will see that the events in this life, and I think what I pull out of this chapter for sure, is that the events that happen in this life, they don't dictate, nor will they stop the will of God. It just continues on. We think that we know what his will is all the time. We think that we can dictate that. We think that things begin to trip him up and he can't seem to get his work done in our lives or in the ministry of the church, but that is certainly not true. I think something that jumped out at me also I wanted to share with you, because you will probably see it. It took me a couple readings to actually see that, but the message that was brought to Jesus was that Lazarus was sick. And he even said to those that were listening that this sickness would not end in death. But yet a little bit later on in the passage we'll read, Jesus talks to the disciples and he said that they needed to go because Lazarus was asleep, that he had fallen asleep. Well, they assumed that sleeping would help him get better, which we believe the same thing it does. When you're sick, you want to sleep. But Jesus then got a little bit more detailed and said, Lazarus is dead. But the message that Jesus received was that he was sick. But now Jesus is reporting that Lazarus is dead. But Lazarus' death was to bring about Jesus being glorified by God's work. And so something miraculous is about to happen, I think, because Jesus didn't go into detail. He just said, hey, it's not going to end in death, but he's dead and we need to go. And so something miraculous is about to happen. And the interesting part is Jesus is the only one that knew. Nobody else got it. Nobody else knew what was about to happen. Everybody seemed to be confused about details, about trying to understand what Jesus was saying to them. And so as we get ready to read, what are some things I think that we can learn about God in this passage is he does not work according to our understanding. And we will see in the passage that most of the things that he said, people are not understanding what he's saying, and probably rightly so, because it's a little bit absurd, especially in that day, to say that somebody was going to live again after they died, and they were going to witness that. And so God's work it doesn't happen according to our understanding. And I think that God is definitely more interested in people believing than understanding. I think he wants us to believe in him, believe in his abilities, believe in his work, believe what he says, what's written in the word, rather than so be focused on understanding what everything means. I think that kind of takes away from faith when we believe that we have to understand everything in order to believe. And so I think God's probably more interested in us, not that he doesn't want us to understand, but I think he really just wants us to just bottom line, just believe, just absolutely believe in him. And the last thing I think that we learn from God is don't this is not trivial when I say it, but it's extremely important, that God is awesome. He is just absolutely awesome. And he is way beyond our understanding and our ability to think. And so you just can't describe him outside of everything that he does. Everything that he says is awesome. So what do we learn about people? Well, I believe that as people, we cannot grasp the full goodness of God's work. We see the good things that he does in Scripture. We see the good things that he does in our lives, friends, family, this sort of thing, and in our lives. But I don't think we're capable of understanding or grasping the full goodness of who he is. And I know for myself, and I'm going to assume that everybody else, we can't think outside the finite. We think we can. We think we can move into the infinite realm or think like God thinks, and we just can't. And we'll see that in the passage. People trying to understand, but they just can't. And then I think that we seem to be situational in our belief of God. And that's a sad thing to say that and to understand that, but I think that we're very fickle in our belief systems. When something good happens, we believe in God, and when something bad happens, we boo-hoo God, and we don't understand why he does things, and so it's situational a lot of times for us to believe, and we certainly see that a little bit in our passage today as well. And so next steps, I think that me personally, I'm just going to put out 3 or 4 things for you to maybe think about, and maybe you can come up with some on your own as well. But I think for me, I need to strive to accept God on his terms, not on mine. Oftentimes, I find myself doing that. It's accepting him or trying to believe or accept what God does based on my terms and what my thinking is. I need to realize that I don't dictate his moves. God doesn't move based on what I think or what I say. He moves based on himself and truth. And I need to stop acting like I am equal to God in my understanding of life. Oftentimes, we think we've got life all figured out, and the reality is we don't. And God does, because he's the creator of life. And I need to worship him for who he is rather than what he does. And that goes back to that situational belief stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and read the passage. It's a little bit longer than what I normally read, actually, but we're going to go ahead and read that, and then I'm going to pray, and then we will send you out to do great works for the kingdom. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to the disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but that just kind of shows. It's like we would do the same thing. "Let's go, guys. Let's go." Anyway, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen Jesus believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it, so that they might arrest him. Good luck with that. All right. Well, let's go ahead and pray. Father, I am so thankful for this passage to help us to understand that your works are far greater than ours. And we also see that some people believe, some don't, Father, and they were out to kill Jesus simply because of the good works that he was doing. But yet you were more interested in glorifying your Son. And Father, I'm thankful for your faithfulness. I'm thankful for your steadfastness, that you are more concerned about Jesus than you are about our understanding and our fickle thoughts. And so, Father, I pray that as we continue through this book, as we continue to serve you, that we will always seek you for your guidance, that we would glorify you, that we would praise you, and that our worship would be 24/7. Wherever we are, we would always worship you with everything we say and do. And Father, I'm so grateful for Jesus. And it's in his name I pray. Amen. Well, that's all for today. Until we see you again, you are sent.